alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Scott and Keith are Titterpigs, yeah. Keith and Scott are Titterpigs, oh yeah. They're gonna talk about sweet, sweet RPGs. And it's the Titterpigs, the RPG podcast.
Open this goddamn door, I'll kick your rotten heads in! Mommy!
All right, welcome back to Titterpigs. This is episode 15, and with us today we have Charlie. And Charlie, if I butcher your last name, please correct me. Menzies, is that right?
Menzies, or in kind of native Scotland, Menzies. So it's pronounced differently all over the place. So don't worry.
Well, I apologize, but welcome to Titterpigs. We're happy to have you, and you are from Parable Games. Is that correct?
Indeed, yes. I'm the lead designer and writer for Parable Games.
Sweet.
Excellent.
God. Look who we got with us.
What's that?
I said, look who we have with us.
I know, and just in time because 'tis the season. I don't know how it is over there in the UK, but here the scent of spice lattes are in the air. Cable knit sweaters are being donned, and sexy outfits to portray your favorite pop culture character is currently being bought, and it's a time of the season not just for Halloween but for horror games, and that's kind of what Shiver seems to be. But before we get into what Shiver is, listeners like to know about the people that we have on here and a little bit of their history. So if you wouldn't mind, we'll start with what got you, and I would assume your brother also into gaming.
So the kind of main area where we got into gaming of like just basic tabletop gamings is like we always used to play board games as a family and as kids, and our granddad actually got us really into chess as kids, and we always used to play against one another. And our granddad, we never beat him. He was very, very good. It still is very, very good. But in terms of like tabletop role playing, that was something for me that I personally discovered when I was at university. So for me, that was something that kind of emerged when I went off to York to study film television production, and kind of gathered together a group of friends. Had a friend who really wanted to kind of DM a session, and we just gave it a go, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So I started with D&D 5e, like kind of a lot of people kind of have now. And for us, it was very much it scratched an itch to tell quite cinematic big stories together, kind of in a unique way, especially as frustrated film students who didn't have the budget to make anything with explosions or special effects. If you're playing a bunch of fantasy heroes where that's happening, that's wonderful. So kind of I graduated, I eventually moved to London to kind of start working in post-production in film and TV, and all of my friends in the film industry got scattered to the four winds, some in other countries, some in other kind of areas of the country. And I thought a really nice way to kind of keep everyone together and kind of talking and stuff was to carry on playing RPGs together. And it just so happened around this time that I was kind of thinking about it, I'd won a writing competition, funnily enough, for I think it was a 500-word short story thing with Penguin Random House that I won, and it gave me a an Amazon voucher that allowed me to buy all of the core D&D books. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been able to get into the hobby because I couldn't afford it. And I used that to set up a game with so I kind of had a writer's circle when I was at university, brought all of those kind of people in, and we started playing again. And at this time, I was running the game. And some things started to emerge when I was kind of running D&D that some of my friends were finding it a little bit tricky, finding the rules hard, and some of my broader friendship group kind of suffer from dyslexia and dyspraxia and dysnumerous as well. So seeing those big tables of numbers, intimidating. It was something that quite on my side of the table, I was doing a lot of heavy lifting to make the game enjoyable for them, because it was something that barrier to access was an issue. So just on a whim, I kind of started kind of being like, what if I just homebrewed my own system and had a little play around with something? And we played around with it, played a couple of our favorite kind of horror movie plots together, and had a real fun time, and just had this all in like a big thick notebook. And it was one Christmas I went back up to see my family because they're kind of in the Midlands, Derbyshire area. I sat down and was talking to my brother, and my brother at this point, he'd established a friendly local gaming store, Seven City Collectibles, kind of up around the Nottinghamshire area. And we were just chatting, and I kind of had my notebooks with me, and I ended up showing him the game because I knew he obviously, was into games, like kind of selling games, like running games at his store. He was reading through, and I basically kind of gave him a soft pitch of the game of just to kind of talk about. And he kind of closed my notebook and looked at me and said, "Well, right, when do you want to make it?" And I was like, "Oh, no, it was just it's just something I was doing with my friends. I thought you'd be interested." And he was like, "No, like this, you could sell this. Like this could be a thing. I've not seen something like this in my store. Like we could make this. Do you want to make it?" And I was just went, "Yeah, why not?" Like I think, and we kind of just started this development together whilst I was still in London, and then I eventually left London and moved back north, kind of closer to family. And then because was working in another job, but we were closer, so development began to speed up. Then the pandemic hit, and I was working for a university at the time, doing kind of online education stuff in film, and the kind of work amount was very scattershot, and kind of there were like kind of big areas of downtime, and we just kind of looked at one another and said, well, shall we make the push and just get this released? We've been working on this for years. We've been doing play testing by that point, pushed it, and then the first book emerged and got received quite well, and now we're just continuing with everything. And that's kind of how Shiver came to be, and kind of how I got into role-playing games. Yeah.
There we go. I was muted. Sorry. But wow, that's a roller coaster ride. That's kind of went from a 0 to 60 in a few seconds. Most people, it's like I played my first game when I was 12, and then around in my 20s or 30s, that's when I made something or whatever. So there was this kind of like long period of transition, but you just dove in feet first into the whole thing and took off. So that's good to know that people who create these games, you don't need a foundation of I've been playing D&D since I was 2 years old before I even spoke. No, it's just exactly. just having the push and the interest is enough, and I think that kind of says a lot for a lot of people out there who are kind of wondering, in like your shoes, I've got this game, is it worth doing it? And they may not have someone like your brother to go, no, let's do this and push you, but it's definitely something to where if you're questioning, if this is something that someone might want, try to get it out there, try to push it forward. So that's fantastic. So, but
so I love the creation story of Shiver, like how it came about, but so for listeners, educate. So this episode is really about educating not only Scott and I on Shiver, everything about Shiver, and what other products you have and what's in the pipeline, but educating listeners too. So let's just kind of let's dial it back, kind of hit the foundational piece. What is Shiver itself, the core game? What is it?
Okay, so Shiver is a setting neutral horror RPG, with the objective being you can take any of your favorite horror movie books, films, TV shows, any piece of pop culture that you really, really like, as well as your own stories, and bring them to life on the tabletop. The objective is that you can play as anyone, anywhere, anytime, in any setting. So you could be playing as medieval peasants fighting a demon boar 1 minute, or you could be shooting off into space and punching a xenomorph the next. That because for me it kind of came from my love of genre cinema, in particular the horror genre, and I hadn't really seen something that would allow you to jump so wildly between systems, between settings, I should say. Sorry.
Okay.
And kind of basically taking in the whole broad church of horror, whether it's slashers, or your ghost stories, or your kind of demonic possessions, and it means you could play it all with the system, trying to make a kind of Swiss Army knife of horror. So that's kind of was the idea with the kind of the mission statement of Shiver, in terms of like the kind of stories that we wanted to tell at the tabletop. On the mechanical side, I really wanted it to be beginner friendly and accessible to people who found numeric systems rather intimidating. So this is kind of where the archetype dice system, which is a unique dice system that we designed especially for the game, was born out of. So it's really, really simple. It's a dice pool based system. We have 2 types of dice. We have a core skill die and we have a talent die, and they're all fully symbolic. And the 6-sided die, yep, that is a talent die.
It is. I have the dice set.
But yes, so the 6-sided die, the core skill die. So in Shiver there are 6 core skills that are your kind of main groupings. So you've got grit, which is kind of like how strong you are, your fortitude, how resistant you are to damage, kind of how much you can kind of grit your teeth and kind of like push through a difficult situation. You have wit, which is kind of how dexterous you are, how quickly you're going to react to things, and also spot things that are kind of hidden or out of the corner of your eye. So very much kind of like your reaction times and your kind of speed of thought, as well as the sharpness and keenness of your eye. You have smarts, which is kind of how intelligent you are, how good at investigating, working with machines, anything that's kind of a bit more kind of complex and requires some form of deductive thought. Then you have hearts, which is anything that's charisma based from both sides. So if you want to kind of charm and smooth your way for a situation, or intimidate and lie and cheat, then hearts kind of covers both sides of the gamut. Then we start to drift away a little bit from kind of the core skill areas that you see in other RPG games, as now we get into luck. So luck is genuinely just how lucky you are as a person and how much the fates are on your side. Because for all of those people who have seen a good horror film, they do realize that there definitely is a certain amount of chance involved with making sure you make it through the night. And then finally we have strange, which is anything that crosses the line of normality in the story, things that are a little bit on the weirder side, the stranger side, the supernatural side, for example, and is also heavily tied into how players navigate and resist fear within the game, which is another large mechanical element, because it wouldn't be a horror game if characters couldn't be afraid.
Right.
Fair enough. So using symbols, obviously that's one element, right? That's sets the game apart. What else sets Shiver apart from other horror games? Because I mean, it's competing with a litany of other games out there. So
it's
and
that as also what would be most. I mean, it's not a generic role playing system, but it's a toolbox designed for you to create whatever you want. So that would be the other thing. And you had mentioned that there's a lot of role playing game systems out there that would profess to be generic, but they don't really allow to easily move between different genres as your game is. So yeah, and on top of that, what would make this different than those?
Yeah. So to expand firstly what I think is unique about the dice system, in terms of how it actually interacts with story. So because it's symbolic and because the symbols actually represent something with meaning rather than like success or failure, it renders an interesting thing with your dice pool. Then becomes kind of, you can explore non-binary success. So the example I use is like, say you want to kick down a door, for example. So say I want to roll a load of grit. So I roll my dice pool, and say I roll 3 grit and it's a flimsy door, that door's coming off its hinges. The more symbols I see, the more successful I'm going to be. However, there is room to kind of fail forward in interesting ways with Shiver. So say I rolled a bunch of smarts, for example. As a director, our version of the GM of the game, I could kick the door, stub my toe, and be hopping around, maybe even take a little bit of damage for my trouble. But as I'm hopping around, I start looking down and begin to investigate the environment and see my foot has slipped the doormat and there's a key underneath there. And I pull it out and I open the door that way because I've rolled loads of smarts instead. Or if I've rolled a load of strange and kind of triggered something bad or something strange, perhaps a bouncer opens the door and a combat suddenly triggers as you're trying to break in somewhere. So in that sense, we call that reading the knuckle bones. So it's that the story, for me, the issue that I've always run into with numerical systems when I'm playing, especially on the kind of GM side, is that numbers don't really tell a story unless you're kind of getting a 1 or a 20 in D&D, for example. It's like either you've completely whiffed it and it's gone very badly, or you've done something amazing and it's incredible. With the archetype dice system, the dice are there to kind of help as a role-playing aid. So it can be there for the games master, for the director, to find new avenues for success or to move the stories forward, and also encourage role-playing out of newer players. So for example, if somebody rolled a load of smarts when they were going for a grit check, and be like, you've rolled a lot of smarts there, can you think of an intelligent way that you resolve this instead? That like you using like different skills in different ways and moving the story forward, because I think that is one of the biggest thing is that with the archetype dice system is narrative momentum.
Right.
Is that everything we put in the rule set and with the dice system is designed to always have consequence and move things forward.
Okay. Sorry,
so on the flip, I was going to say on the flip side of that, how we handle failure also does that as well. So when you roll a check and you roll a load of strange, that ticks up minutes on what we call the doom clock. So in the game, there is a 60-minute clock, which is represented on the director's screen that you can track along the top of a peg. The way that the doom clock works is that it is a consequence for failure for bringing about bad events that you would normally see in a horror film. So there are 15-minute kind of intervals that trigger what are called doom events. So every 15-minute marker, something bad's going to happen. So an example that I like to use is something like a slasher film. So let's take, to me, akin to Friday the 13th, for example. So you've got a bunch of camp counselors. It's summer. They're by the lake. All the kids have just gone home and they're packing up for the summer. At 1:15, they find out somebody cuts the power. So they kind of go to the fuse box, find that somebody slashed through it with a bladed weapon. 1:30, they're starting to get a little bit hairy. They think maybe we should get out of here. You go to the school bus, try and turn the key, doesn't turn on. Somebody's ripped out the spark plugs. 1:45, they hear a scream. Camp counselor Kenny has gone. There's a streak of blood leading into the woods. You lose a key NPC. He can't assist you anymore. He can't give you information. He's dead. And at midnight events are ones that are the major kind of like third act finale type events. So for us, in this case, it would be the slasher coming out of the woods and becoming a stalking permanent threat. So if they're trying to, get the fuel and get the engine part to get the boat going, for example, if they haven't completed that yet, Jason Voorhees or your Michael Myers is going to be there harrying them constantly, making that harder because they've ticked the doom clock up through as a consequence of their own failures. So I'd say those two along with the uniqueness of being able to do any setting, I think that's kind of the trifecta of uniqueness, I would say, for Shiver.
It's something just clicked as you were describing the dice system, because you had mentioned earlier when you were creating this game, you had referenced, some of your friends, dealing with dyslexia. I'm dyslexic myself. So the dealing with some of the numerical values and some of the tables within the system don't really get absorbed as quickly as other aspects, like with these narrative dice. You're going to throw these down. I'm immediately going to be able to disseminate the images quicker and make a determining factor as a GM based on that quicker than, okay, we've got 6 7s, we've got 2 3s, 2 5s. Let's check the table and refer to what this means. And the other thing that kind of clicked with that also, because the only other thing that I can think of in regards to that is like Fantasy Flight Games, their narrative dice system for Star Wars. but these are easily, in the same vein, but these also, again, would be more easily disseminated because each die is a specific thing. You're not just, deducting and subtracting, particular images on the dice actually mean something. So that seems to be an even more quicker and easier narrative system for, these games that seem to be moving quicker with this narrative cinematic flair. And that's kind of what you want. You get that in the Star Wars Fantasy Flight game, but it takes time. You don't just click with it. Whereas these seem like, reading through the book. I don't own the dice like Keith because he didn't buy me any.
Hey,
hey, Christmas is coming up.
It is.
But they are hard to find, by the way, out in the wild. I think I seen them once. So you obviously have to look for them online. But anyways, each one being its own individual definition makes it even easier to see, this is what's rolled up, and everything's visually there, and it's easier to do that and come up with with these scenes. So yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, thank you. Because I've read through the book a bit, and the layout is great, and then it suddenly makes sense to me, like why I'm reading this a lot easier than other books, because it seems to have that that at least that awareness of that for there's a lot more dyslexic people out there in this day and age.
I saw Scott's bulb go off when you were talking. It was like,
yeah, exactly. That's how you know.
Oh, no, thank you for mentioning the layout as well, because I did the book layout for the Shiver books as well. So like I was quite nervous, I think, about like those being kind of the first books I kind of laid out, and had to learn InDesign over the over the pandemic in order to kind of pull the project over the line. But that's really good to hear, because it was like with the layout as well, that was something I was really considering, of just making text slightly larger, spacing things out, because again from talking to my friends and also my own experience of role playing, when you crack open a kind of a role playing rule book tome and you're just hit with a super dense wall of text, there's a huge intimidation factor there, like, and you kind of, but my feeling with a book is when you open a book, you kind of almost want it to be warm and inviting, and you want to dive straight in and start kind of delving and figuring out kind of what's there. Whilst when you have that wall of text, it does put people off. It does kind of cause a barrier, I feel, to entry.
It's something I enjoy, because I like lore dense stuff. But when I do open that particular type of book, I take a deep breath and know, okay, this is going to take me at least 2 or 3 passes to read over this in order to get everything. Whereas, I'm looking at the first page of Shiver, and there's a beautiful picture, a small little paragraph, and then we go to the next page, and it continues in how most people with dyslexia read. It's these chunks, and those are going to be more easily memorized and absorbed than going through, just dense paragraphs of just, 0.5 font as you're trying to get through all of that. So, but no, excellent. And once again, it's just one of those little subtle things where, intentionally or unintentionally, but it sounds like there was a bit of intention to it. It is kind of nice to see certain games have that awareness with people who have certain reading disabilities and still want to play role-playing games, and the only way they're going to be able to access it is by reading it. So there's certain people who will gravitate towards that a lot more than opening up. And this is no slight against my Gloranthophile friends, but opening up the guide to Glorantha and seeing a gigantic paragraph that just page after page after page. But yeah, so anyways,
yeah.
I'm
not even going to comment.
Well, I'll get letters, strongly worded ones.
We'll get letters. Yeah. Okay. So I was going to ask you about Doom clocks, but I think you kind of summarized the Doom clocks really well. I mean, and that right. Your description of the Doom clocks is really what's in the book, and the book describes the Doom clocks really well. But I wanted you to describe it for listeners, because I like the Doom clocks. Did you borrow that idea from other game engines? Because I mean, obviously, clocks are used in like Blades in the Dark and some PBTA derivative games. Is that
So funnily enough, it's I knew of Blades of the Dark, but I hadn't played it around the time that we were kind of designing Shiver. Where I first encountered it, I think, was Elder Sign. I think was where kind of failure had some kind of consequence of basically when it got round, the Elder God turns up.
Okay.
Was like a similar mechanic, and I was like, I quite like this, but it didn't have it was basically a countdown to just one to a creature arriving, which
Okay.
I liked to kind of in a board game setting.
Right.
But then started to think about kind of how it would apply to Shiver, and more of where it actually kind of came from is I started thinking about narrative clocks. So Dan Harmon's quite famous for having a narrative clock system for how he writes sitcoms, although it's slightly different in terms of kind of its cyclical nature. But I was kind of starting to think about that, and then how I started to wonder about, okay, so how do I take from my screenwriting training from when I was at university, how do I take classic 3-act horror movie structure and apply it to something that it can be understood really simply by players and can be interacted with and feel like their actions have narrative consequence. So that was the big thing in terms of that they felt responsible for triggering kind of like these major like movie moments. Like kind of, like your favorite side character dying,
Right.
something exploding, the storm rolling in, the kind of like that there was an element of their failure representing that transgressional nature of a lot of horror, of that through their kind of interaction and their failure, they were generating the horror themselves. And it also kind of like whittled down for me in terms of where it came from, a big ethos that we kind of like developed very early on, is that every role needs to have consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of that, that's why we kind of encourage the reading the knuckle bones, or kind of having, if you roll lots of luck, you can smash 2 luck together and have an extra success. If you roll loads of strange, it ticks up the doom clock. So basically the story never sits still. I can't remember who said it, but someone said that roles should be saved for tension. And I love that as an idea of that every time you're rolling, there should be an edge of tension that you're going to succeed, you're going to fail. And then if it lands in the middle, that there's still going to be some form of consequence that's going to move that narrative forwards. Because the last thing that people want is a roll, you fail, and then you're kind of sat still going, well, what next?
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm trying to teach. I have an 11-year-old granddaughter who I am bringing into the fold of role playing, and trying to explain to an 11-year-old who just wants to roll dice, smash things, and just have a grand old time in small chunks. That you need to roll dice, but if it doesn't propel the story forward, because she just wants to roll dice all the time.
Yeah.
But
clickety clacky.
Yeah, but I have to like ease her off the edge a little bit there and back her down, because like, hey, if there's no consequences, pros or cons to succeeding or failing, I need you to back down a little bit. So you're right. It needs to be, everything needs to be purpose driven. And I can see where your design process, your thoughts are going, taking those cinematic from your formal training, your cinematic, if that's the right term, the cinematic training you've had, your formal training, and working that into the game, you and your brother working that into the game design, with the, incorporating the luck as a, not only is it as a mechanic, but it's also an attribute. And then the weird, the strange element that's ticking the doom clocks. And, I'm liking it thus far. I haven't read the entire book yet, because it's still, it's not a small book. And I just got it just a few days ago. So, but having this conversation we're having now with the explanation of the mechanical elements is really, it's eye opening. I didn't have the boop, the light bulb go off like Scott did, but but I know Scott struggles when he has to read some stuff, and it's just like, so I can appreciate where like the design elements that you have purpose built into this is
Yeah.
Um,
we didn't tell you, Charlie, but this is actually a therapy session for me and my dyslexia. So we're going to roll into that.
It is. Thank you. I'll send you that tenor later.
You're not going anywhere. But yeah, writing on Keith's coattails, I agree with that. I've got children myself. You know, my son's been playing since he was like, I introduced him at about like 10 or 11. He's 15 now. They branched out from, Dungeons and Dragons, and, they're playing, Morkborgs, Cyberpunk. So, and they're doing this on their own. They've eventually moved away from me. I'm just there to run games for them when I need them, but they're doing their own thing. But they have found out as you get older that, you just don't roll the dice to roll the dice. There's got to be some sort of consequences or some sort of, payout in regards to that, a reason for it. But one of the things that I found interesting is with that, a lot of the games like yours at least makes it easier to determine what these consequences or these rewards are going to be, rather than, a 1 or a 20. Everything in between is you're just lobbing the ball back and forth until, something concludes. Whereas with these, they're helping the players and likewise the game master make it more interesting, make the story more interesting. Like, they're providing you these tools to better describe something, rather than, okay, you hit the orc, describe what happens, and 9 times out of 10, you see a deer in the headlight. I stab it, and, and the head goes flying. It's just rinse and repeat. Whereas if they have these prompts, these extra prompts within games such as this, it helps at least those who may not be more, well-rounded in improv and whatnot, or, just generally just don't really feel like performing like that in front of people. It at least gives them a little bit extra to use and present these aspects of the story that they're trying to create when they're playing these games. So it's once again, props, very, very helpful with that. So.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for us, it's kind of two things on that. Your story about your granddaughter rolling again and again and again. So me and my brother, actually, it's one of the things that came up with like the rolls having consequence was an effect of this that we noticed players doing in other RPGs that we were part of. And Barney came up with a term for it that I really liked. He called it the Zelda pot smashing effect. Of basically, if you put a bunch of pots in the room, he'll grab the pot, and smash it, and he'll grab the other one and smash it. But I identified a check in D&D particularly, and fantasy games in particular, that have this problem, and it's doors. And it's why I use doors as an example all the time, because my biggest bugbear with a lot of kind of other RPGs is like, so players hit a door, they want to lockpick the door. Somebody rolls their dice to lockpick a door, it fails. They don't lockpick the door. Another player goes up to the door and be like, let me have a go. I'll roll and lockpick the door. And all of a sudden, you've got 6 people around a door shoving metal implements into it, rolling again and again and again until the DM gets so tired, they just be like, you know what? To hell with it. You open the door. You're in. You're in. I've had it. I've had enough. You want to go in. I understand. Or they just say, like, this door is too heavy. It's unbreakable. And it kind of forces you into that binary position of either, like, kind of seceding and letting people just succeed, or just pushing them away and feeling a little bit like that's and that sometimes I kind of feel like, oh, I don't want you to do what you're doing, kind of thing. Whilst with Shiver, the aim there was like with the door example, so say it was a lock picking the door, maybe your lockpick snaps, maybe it creates a noise. You open the door, but like rather than you just lockpicking it, the door falls over and falls apart and draw some unwanted attention. It's the idea that everything's going to move forward in some way or provides an extra clue so that people don't feel the need to repetitively roll a check until they can get what they want. Because when checks are there without, I guess, a pressing amount of pressure or threat externally, then there isn't that consequence that is going to stop them from rolling again and again and again. But we found as soon as we introduced the doom clock, for example, and you're 2 minutes away, 1 minute away from a doom event, all of a sudden someone's kind of going, they're holding their dice being like, do I lock pick the door? can I do something else that doesn't require a check? Should I do this? Who's best at this? Who's actually really good at this? Should we maybe and you can see like players talking about it, arguing at times of just being like, who's going to do what, because they don't want the bad thing to happen. And that's emerged a really interesting thing in our player base of that. When it comes to Doom and the Doom clock, we now have what we call Doom marchers and Doom managers, is what I've called them. So Doom marchers are people who love the chaos of these horror events popping up. So they'll roll with Wild Abandon. They'll play the weird that has abilities that actively tick up the Doom clock so they can use more powerful things. But then you'll have on the other side the Doom managers who are wringing their hands, storing their luck, desperately trying to take minutes off of the clock to stop the bad things happening. So you have this lovely kind of like pull and push that creates natural drama within groups.
Scott and I.
Yeah. and it's great though, because it's like I've never found it to be like too antagonistic, but it's this. It generates like a nice movie style drama where it's like you have characters who are different and want to solve problems in different ways, and people butt heads, and that just fuels the tension between the characters as well as in the situation, as everyone's kind of a squishy human in Shiver, and no one really knows the best way forward, and in equal measures, like their solutions could end up getting them killed, which is just all part of the fun.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. I like it. I love that, the way that conversation just got shaped with the Doom managers and the Doom marchers, because I can see Scott and I doing that.
It's the RPG cinematic equivalent of the person who's yelling at the screen, "Don't open the door," because he's in there. And then do it, go in there. Yeah.
So you said, about characters, right? So I do want to ask a quick question, and I don't know if there's a quick answer, but so there's 7 different archetypes in the book for characters. One is, because I'm looking at the archetype page in the book, one associated to each of the 7 attributes in the book.
Yes, so you've got the 6 main core skills that they and each archetype aligns, and then you've got the survivor, which is the jack of all trades, master of some, as we've ended up calling them. So they can balance between a few core skills, but then they have a very different array of abilities compared to the others that are all about surviving themselves or keeping the party alive and making sure that everyone's okay. To quite kind of like leadership focused characters, or cockroachy, kind of slimy characters who play dead. That's kind of the survivor. But they're not allocated to a specific core skill, but all the other 6 are. Yeah.
Okay. So with that said, and this being kind of a setting genre neutral set of rules or toolbox, right? Are the archetypes, the character archetypes, do some work better with certain genres than others, or are they all kind of universally adaptable?
So I would say all universally adaptable. And this was one of the biggest design challenges that we had. And this is where the ball was passed back and forth between me and my brother a lot, in terms of like, I'd write a rule for an archetype. He'd say, that works for Wild West fantasy in this, but not this. Maybe like tweak this little bit. Okay, maybe not this, maybe not that. And kind of like refining the rules and shaping them and then we just did the gamut test of where we just picked films, books, TV shows, characters from various different settings, as well as kind of like mythological characters and stuff like that, and just ran the gamut and we just had multiple days just building characters again and again and again and again, running through and testing to see if like, does that feel a little bit off? Does that feel like it shouldn't be here? That kind of thing. So I would say it works across all elements. One thing that I do encourage though, and it's kind of in the book, is that sometimes the phrasing of something has flavor because it like aligns to a horror film, or it aligns to something that's like kind of quite fun and is there to kind of give a bit of inspiration. But there's nothing stopping you from like talking to your director and twisting things slightly to make it work for the setting that you're in. So I recently just did a game with a podcast where I was invited on as a player, and they had been playing with Cyberpunk Red. But they invited us on, and they'd learnt the Shiver system, and they wanted to do a cyberpunk horror story for Halloween. So we were talking about building characters, and one of them landed on, as an example, in the Weird Path. There is a skill called Natural Affinity, which is more to do with, it's meant to be doing like interacting with the natural environment, communicating with plants and animals and things that are inherent to the environment. So he liked a lot of the options that were kind of in that tree, but he was a bit stuck on the Natural Infinity, being like, I don't really know. In a cyberpunk world, there aren't many, there aren't many dogs, there aren't many cats, there aren't many trees. And funnily enough, I'd used that recently as a Winter Soldiers type character, and I said, well, I took that ability and I had it that actually this is a modern world and there are more machines. So the thing is that what if your character could just talk to machines in some way, because your natural affinity is for what's in the world, and what's in the world is that. So it's kind of like, although we may have given a specific example, we really encourage people to squash and squeeze and hack the system to make it work where it works for you, and always make it a discussion. But the thing is that we encourage that level of flexibility. So it's kind of I'm a big staunch believer in kind of like everything I've written in that book is not law, in the sense of that it should have some breathing room so you can tell the stories that you want to tell.
Yeah, I'm looking at the archetype page, and I'm immediately connecting the dots to the different archetypes that are associated in Cyberpunk Red, and I'm just I'm going to make a dad joke here. I'm seeing the Matrix. The weird would work great for what you just described as like, the net runner, because they're interacting with the environment. The fool would be, a rocker boy, and things like that. They just, connect. So, that's a sign of a good system that, in my opinion, if you're going for like something that is, a generic role playing system, so to speak. I mean, granted, yours is still kind of geared focused towards cinematic horror. But, most generic role-playing systems are the archetypes in here interesting to use in the different genres? Some do a good job of it. Some tend to just do really well in certain aspects, and whereas they kind of fall flat in others. So that's excellent. That's excellent.
Thank you. I think with the archetypes, what we were really aiming to do is that they were quite inspired by Cabin in the Woods, actually, in terms of how you have these archetypal characters that they're trying to fit into a horror narrative to sacrifice in a ritual. Sorry, spoilers for Cabin in the Woods if anyone's not seen it. But we added some bits to it, gave some bits an update into kind of what we kind of felt fitted really, really well. And we kind of realized that the thing with the archetypes is that, say you're playing as a warrior, that the abilities and the paths that you can explore within that, it kind of gives you a specific mechanical way to play in a certain amount. But we also really wanted it to feel themey. So the whole thing with kind of like a lot of cinematic horror is that there are tropes, there are certain characters that emerge in every story. I mean, you could go broad on that in terms of, as you're saying, with it being a generic system, there are characters that emerge in every story. There's the kind of element of monomyth and kind of these kind of character archetypes that appear. So we wanted it to be broad enough in that sense that when you think of a fool in a cyberpunk setting, you're thinking of like kind of how that character behaves, who they are, like kind of what their kind of flavor is, and then combining that with the mechanics that you have as well. So I think kind of what I'm trying to say is that we wanted the archetypes not to be just looked at from a mechanical perspective, but from a character perspective as well. And we found so far by terming it that way and by kind of describing them the way that they are, it encourages people to lean into their roles and lean into like those kind of character types you find in classical stories by mechanically rewarding them as well for doing that. And it means that you get quite rich and quite fun characters out of the box very, very quickly, is what we're finding, which is really, really nice.
Sweet. I like them. Excuse me. I like the flexibility. I don't get all the Cyberpunk Red analogies because I don't play Cyberpunk, but hey, what the hell? But I just like adaptability. I mean, I like the idea that I can play a Sherlock Holmesian Victorian era excuse me horror game, or I can flip the script and play like a 1920s like noir pseudo pulpy detective kind of horror thing, or a modern teenage investigative horror. I mean, the adaptability of the rules, of the character archetypes, more so the character archetypes is what appeals to me.
Mhm.
I don't have to buy in particular, I don't have to go buy another set of another book, another expansion, just to get not the rules, but character options and things like that, just to be able to play in a different time period.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I think that brings us quite nicely to what we've been doing with our expansion content and how that
that's what we
actually
want to talk about
relates to
next.
characters.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I find it really interesting you say that, because that was our objective of just being that, like, almost any character you want to play with the Shiver core system, you can. But then when we started thinking about expansions, it became a matter of right, where do people want to go? Where are the gaps? Where do people want more guidance? Where do people want more options and fun things to kind of splice together? So our first expansion was Shiver Gothic. And the thing that we explored there was providing new archetype trees that are themed in a very similar way using the core skills, but for playing as your classic Gothic monsters, because everyone wanted to play as Frankenstein's monster or a werewolf or the Invisible Man, or and those are things that do require more mechanical nuance in terms of how they kind of operate, but are also very themey. So what we ended up doing was I wrote a unique setting. So it's our first unique setting book. So the first book's The Secret of Spire Home. So it's a big Gothic city filled with spires, monsters, vampires, death, plague, overbearing kind of religious orders, the works. It's kind of got everything that you want to kind of play anything kind of that's Gothic horror related, whether it's your Mary Shelley, Edgar Allan Poe, or if you love Hammer horror movies, then you can also replicate that as well. But that's kind of where the monsters came into it, because for me, I grew up on Hammer horror films, but also on the Universal horror films as well. And I had a real soft spot for monsters. I always felt bad for them. I always felt that they were really the heroes. I always wanted to play as them. So that was always like first on our docket. But the whole thing that you're kind of saying there with kind of like core systems, like needing to be robust enough that it doesn't feel like that's a necessary purchase, like you need to have it in order to get something to work. That's something that we're really kind of keen on, and it's how we've been thinking about expansions, of looking at them as being modular. So they're things that you can clip in or clip out, whether you want, if you just want something extra, if you want a little bit of kind of spice in a certain subgenre direction, then you can. And we're doing exactly the same with our kind of other expansions. Shiver Slasher and Blockbuster have similar mechanics that are this kind of modular element. So you could pile in as many elements as you want and layer them on top and tell a deep, very complex horror story. Or you could strip it back to the bare bones and use the core system, or just take one bit from one expansion, one bit from another, and just blend it together, and just to kind of using it like tools rather than, selling you a car without the wheels. It's more like offering a spoiler that you can put on, or, some nice decor that will actually kind of make your experience, your particular experience that you want to have, more comfortable and a better ride.
Okay. I like that. So right now, right now, what products are currently available, whether they're in physical print or available only in digital, can listeners like go out and find right now?
Okay, so start with stuff that's out physically. So we've got the Shiver Core rulebook. So that has everything you need to run the game. So player side, director side, has a full bestiary, items, weapons, and even a starter adventure in the back, the works. So that's the core rulebook. And then we have the Cursed Library, which is a collection of 5 different stories that explore basically various different subgenres. So you've got like 1980s Kids on Bikes, you've got a sci-fi story, you've got even 1970s Stuck in a Creepy Cornfield, a Weird West story. You've got my love letter to John Carpenter's The Thing is kicking about in there as well. So that's a great kind of physical book if you want to kind of understand and see some examples of how broad you can go with the system, because it just jumps around and shows you what you can do. Then we have our dice and our screens, which are also a kind of physical product that's available too. We have just released the first Shiver Gothic book digitally, and it should hopefully be coming to print and be distributed kind of in the first quarter of next year, alongside the second Gothic book. So the first Gothic book is Secrets of Spirehome. So that is a giant fringe and 20-page monster. It's got a 10-chapter story. It has full archetype rules for playing as monsters, as well as like a load of like lore, new Gothic backgrounds, and loads of stuff to kind of play around with. So if you want to play a big epic Gothic story that has a fantasy tinge to it, that's the book for you. And then the second book connects up with that and tells a story that's underneath that city. So that's the Disciples of Dregstone, where it is a side adventure where your players can fall down the sewers and become embroiled in a conspiracy involving rat folk that live in the city of Dregstone, beneath the cobbled streets. And there is a despotic rat king, a rat resistance, and all forms of kind of mutated horrors running around in the sewers. So that's the second book, which has some mechanical elements as well, of like, if you want to play as a rat folk person, we've expanded some kind of rules in there as well. So that's so Disciples of Dregstone, that's not digitally out yet, but will be soon, hopefully in the next kind of 2 to 3 months. That should be being released, with aiming I think for around December. I think the digital version of that should be released as well.
Now, before we get to the last part, because I know you got something in the pipeline, where can listeners find those currently available books?
Okay, so all the digital products and physical product you can get through our web store at www.parablegames.co.uk. We're also digital versions are also available on TTRPG. If you in the US, if you ask at your friendly kind of local gaming store if you would like them to stock Shiver, there are options for that. We have distribution in America. We're distributing through Indie Press Revolution, as well as a few other avenues as well. So if you ask about it, give them our email, contact Parable Games. They can get in touch, and we can and we're really keen to set up distribution links to as many stores as possible in the US, and get get it kind of have more representation in stores, because we are aware of the size of the US, that sometimes kind of getting stuff everywhere is not always the easiest. But those are all avenues where you can kind of get those. Just a note on dice. I know that proprietary dice can sometimes make people a little bit on edge. There is a entirely free digital dice roller on our website, www.shiverrpg.com. You can go on there. The dice roller is completely free. It can remember your character and the state you're in. So if you're needing to run a session over multiple nights, if you don't clear your cookies, it's there. It's going to stay, and you don't have to kind of note everything down. So all of that works, and it scales to mobile as well. So if you are still wanting to play and check out the books but are struggling on dice, or don't want to kind of invest in proprietary dice, then there is just a free option for rolling dice that's available to everybody. I think that's where everything is. I think so.
You missed one thing. I don't know. Did you mention the case files that are available also? Digitally?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, flip it! I completely forgot about those. Yes,
I got a question about that once you mentioned if you don't address it. Yeah.
Yes. So they're all available on our web store and on Drive-Thru as well. So the case files were from our first Kickstarter for the core game. We smashed through a number of stretch goals, and so I started writing additional kind of content, story hooks, elements, and ideas for what you could play with Shiver. So those are what the case files are there. Do you have a specific question about them?
I was just curious. Is Lance going to be a thing as time moves on with Shiver?
Lance is definitely going to be a thing. Okay. It's definitely something I want to explore. It is our supernatural kind of investigatory force that we kind of want to have a little established canon for. So yes, Lance will start popping up in more things as we release more products, is the hope.
Yeah, those who are curious about lands, get you pick up a copy of the case file if you get the core rule book, and it's self-explained in a single paragraph on literally the first page of what it all is. So yeah, and it's and I'm going to use a reference just in people. Yeah, like you said, it's like a BR PD type thing, but it's got this wonderful kind of cinematic kind of kitschy thing, maybe the wrong word, but I just love it starts in Arthurian times, and Sir Gawain was involved, and but it's due to the Van Helsing's research. I just love the the mashing together of these wonderful things, just like that sounds
a little
fantastic.
thread that runs through it all.
Yeah, I want more. So yeah, that's great.
I really wanted to create a quite British feeling, like kind of like that agency, because I feel like it's always something I've desired in kind of fiction. So I kind of thought, why not? Let's make some old Arthurian knights who are hunting monsters across modern day.
Fantastic. Okay, so the last thing we want to give you a platform for. We know that you guys have a new Kickstarter launching tomorrow on the 11th October. So here's your platform. If you want to, pitch the product, obviously tell us about it. I've been following your kind of run up to it on Twitter, on social media. But a lot of listeners may or may not have been following it. So, let's all learn more about it.
Yeah, fantastic. So October 11th, we have another crowdfunding campaign launching on GameFound. It is another crowdfunding platform, just like Kickstarter, for those who've not encountered GameFound yet. So the project that will be crowdfunding is Shiver Double Feature. So this is a project for us to explore two big areas of subgenre within the kind of horror genre. So first up, if you like the idea of a horror kind of RPG, but you're a little bit nervous about the blood and the gore and maybe it being a little too kind of horror filled, Shiver Blockbuster is something that we think would be for you. So this is us focusing on what I call like tales of Spielbergian peril. So it's your Jurassic Park and the Raptors. It's the ghost pirates in Pirates of the Caribbean. It's we even have a story in there that's kind of like my love letter to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Because like as a kid seeing that film and being like, I'm shrunk down and I'm having to fight a ant off with a matchstick is terrifying, but also kind of has this sense of kind of high adventure and fun and kind of action to it. So they're more action kind of focused stories with peril that still use the Shiver mechanics. On the other side, for our more horror diehards, we've got Shiver Slasher, which is all about kind of like your classic slasher movies, kind of creating singular enemies that are extremely powerful, difficult to kill, and stalking your kind of players through different environments and stories. So that's on that side in terms of kind of the subgenres that we're exploring. In terms of the products that are going to be available, for the first time, we're going to be launching starter sets. So we're doing not one, but two starter sets for both sides. So if you want to kind of have a more horror light introduction to Shiver, you can jump on Blockbuster, and there's a dinosaur themed tale in there going into a mad billionaire has carved out a hollow in the earth and has made a hollow earth park, and is kind of wheeling away kind of with dinosaurs and other mad experiments, and it's all going to go terribly wrong. And on the slasher side, of course, what could possibly go wrong? Hubris isn't a thing. And on the slasher side, you have Return to Camp Blood, where you're a bunch of kind of teenage camp counselors who find themselves accidentally in almost the plot of a slasher movie sequel, the camp already having been subjected to a killer who is potentially not so dead as everybody first thought. So those starter boxes have everything in there that you need to play, some deluxe character sheets, dice, a slimmed down version of the rule book, as well as those unique adventures as well, all in like a nice premium box for you to store all of your stuff in. So if you want to give like Shiver a try, and kind of having packaged together, and you want to kind of pick a certain theme and play it in an evening or a couple of evenings, the starter boxes are for you. For those who want to explore a bit deeper, in those kind of subgenres, we actually have a hardcover book for both sides again. So on the blockbuster side, we've got Legends of the Silver Scream, which is about all of those kind of stories. So your ghost pirates, your shrunken kids, your big sci-fi adventure, hunting a giant shark in the ocean, they're all within that kind of blockbuster book. The mechanical element that we're introducing there is called Road to Stardom. So to lower the horror tension just a little bit more, there is a meta element to the game of that. Instead of playing a character in that story, you're playing an actor who's starring in the movie of that blockbuster picture. And outside of the game, in the interludes between, you receive like awards. You can get an Oscar, or you can potentially get a Razzie, and that will provide you like boons and busts in your next movie as your career as a star progresses. And we also have a little story that goes on in between of there is some spooky mystery that's occurring on the studio lot that your actors, as themselves, potentially may have to solve. On the slasher side, we have a similar element mechanically that is designed to kind of encourage like long form play. So slasher movies, we know they're notoriously deadly. Characters die. Characters in Shiver tend to die, right. Which is totally fine. Like a good death is as good as a good life in Shiver, in my opinion. And with slashers, so if your character kind of gets bumped off and you move on to the next story, what do? Who's your next character? So we came up with the idea of the inheritance system of that. If your character dies, they can pass on kind of some elements to their next of kin, who becomes your next character. They can be completely different to them mechanically. They can get on, they can not get on. You can kind of have this kind of almost like complex chain of stories that kind of go through with different characters. So you could maybe hand, you managed to defeat the killer and get their machete, but you died in the process. That machete might pass on to your next of kin, for example. Or potentially they left an encouraging voice message. But you also inherit some of their fears, some of their flaws, some of their traumas trickle down through that family tree. So you also get some of the residual fear of being hunted across your family by these strange and supernatural slashers. So what the story is there, it is a multi-decade story that starts in the 1930s with a prequel story, and then we run from the 1950s all the way to 2020. And it explores kind of roughly each decade a different slasher in each decade, kind of almost tracking the history of the genre and providing an interconnected story across nearly 100 years. Where you could start in the 1950s and survive and be fighting Jason Voorhees with your Zimmer frame. Or, you could retire your character if your character passes away. You can then round off the story by having 3, 4, 5 generations of characters, having finally kind of defeated this lingering evil that's been following your family. So that's the slasher book. But yeah, and that's everything. Yeah, I'm in double feature.
I can hear several hardcore gamers' mouths watering right now. Just the sound of that alone, the idea of like, wait, you mean I get to exist over in generation and generation during this potential campaign and have residual aspects and carryovers, and you mean I can play something like Pendragon, if I'm not interested in Arthurian legend, I can still have this long-term legacy game.
You were reading my mind.
Yeah. So yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And for us, that was the kind of thing that we've pointed out to some people. Some people said like, "Oh, I like the sound of that, but I'm not too sure on slasher." Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, like, there's loads of rules in there for kind of making powerful singular characters. You can just flavor them differently. And if you want to play your Arthurian legend about a cursed family that's being beleaguered by demons and ghosts and constantly being picked off generation after generation, you can do that with the inheritance system. Hence the modular element I was talking about before, is that the inheritance system is designed to be plucked out and basically slotted into any other subgenre. We just felt that the place to introduce it was slasher, because we thought that would be the most fun and most interesting.
Go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
No. Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, I was just going to say with the emergence of the Sandman series that came out, and for those who are familiar with the Sandman stories in the series, the stories of Dream takes place over generations, and of course gamers start thinking, what type of game would I use to run a game that exists within the Sandman universe? Well, something like the inheritance system makes sense because that takes place over several generations, sometimes, centuries, of course, but at least there's connecting threads between them all of characters who either continue on through the story through generations of, of kin or family or people who live longer than extended. But, suddenly my mind is going, I want to use this to do something within the Sandman. So yes, it leans itself towards the inherent conceit of the campaign, but instantly I'm just going, I'm doing what a lot of gamers do. How can I tweak this for something else? I want to get my hands on this now. Give me the tools. So anyways, keep going.
No, I was going to ask. So, my mouth. I was one of those guys that my mouth was watering on that stuff. I was one of the gamers Scott's referring to. So on GameFound, what's going to be the price point like for the box sets, for the books, the all in, versus is this so before you answer, is this a pre-order or is this like incentivized to pledge, and support the crowdfunding, where like if I go throw my money at it tomorrow or throw Scott's money at it tomorrow, or do I, am I incentivized to do that, or am I going to pay the same tomorrow as I would in retail?
So
if that makes sense.
Yes, and I understand completely. So with the GameFound, think of it like a pre-order at a kind of healthy discount compared to the retail RRP. For kind of waiting just a little time as we've kind of finished those books off, get them ready for print, and so there'll be the typical kind of 6 months to a year kind of lag time, a ton of physical products, and that will, as we've kind of always done with all our products, we're dedicated to everything goes to our backers first before anything touches kind of broad retail. Kind of thing in terms of kind of physical products. In terms of the price points that are there, so if you want to pick up a box starter set, they'll be coming in at £40. And usually I'd have to do a conversion, but because if anyone's been watching the news and our economy is tanked, the dollar and the pound's about the
parity,
same.
so
We're at parity now, so this makes this much easier. Thanks, Liz Truss. Yes, so a singular starter set is around £40 or $40, and you can pick either one, slasher or blockbuster. If you like the full flavor of one of them, so say you want everything to do with slasher, so you want the box set and you want the book with the inheritance system, that's £75, so you get that all bundled together. Or on blockbuster, exactly the same. You get the Legends of the Silver Scream and the Road to Stardom mechanic, and in that big book along with the box as well. We do have a special, which is the VIP double feature, which is for £140. You get both books and both starter sets, all bundled together. And then we do have some other larger bundles that will be revealed when the GameFound goes live, which is pretty much a everything Parable Games has ever made bundle, which will just give you everything. Is the idea. So that will be kind of everything that's we've had with like Gothic, the core system, the starter sets, and the new books as well, as a big mega bundle, which I can confirm will have a very hefty discount for kind of committing full whack to the Shiver RPG system.
Very cool.
So that's the spread. But one thing because we've had quite a few questions about it, so I'll just clarify this with GameFound as well. For anyone who currently is playing Shiver and is a returning backer, GameFound works differently to Kickstarter. You can select individual items and add them to your pledge. You can design your own pledge as well. So if you just want to pick up the slasher book, that's totally fine. You can do that with GameFound straight away. You don't have to pledge £1 and wait for the pledge manager at all. So you can get that all organized, get it ordered, and leave it alone. You don't have to pay £1, remember when it finishes a month after when the pledge manager goes live, and organize all of that. So that's one of the benefits we found with going with GameFound as a platform, is that for those people who just want to dip in or grab one of the books or two of the books or like a little bit here or there, you can do that. So
nice.
So don't worry, it's not locked. The books aren't locked into bundles. It's just something I just want to confirm to people.
So it's all a cart
then. Pull them out. Yes, so the bundles give you a certain amount of discount.
Sure.
Is the thing, but you can pull out individual items for less of a discount if you just want individual things. I think the books themselves individually will still be discounted anyway.
Right,
Is the
okay.
thing individually. I'll double check that with my brother, but I think it that is the case. It's just everything has a blanket across it in terms of discount from the retail RRP.
Right.
Okay.
Quick question. Are there retail options in this also, similar to how they are in others? The primary reason I'm asking is well, both Keith and I know people who own game stores near
We
us,
do.
and
Like
and
your brother. We know
right.
people.
Yeah, so I'm going to be contacting my friend. He's currently in, for those who are listening, he's looking to restock his RPG wall. So with
Fantastic.
stuff other than just the big two or three. So I'm going to be giving him your information to see what he can do in order to get the core rule book. But are there options in the game found crowdsourcing if he just wanted to get a couple of the the companion books or the starter sets?
There is indeed. I can't remember what the price point is. It's just the game in front of me, but there is a retail option which will basically allow retailers to kind of commit a pledge to kind of receive a certain amount of product.
Right.
But then from there, that gives them access to the pledge manager where everything's discounted, and they can order more if they want on top of that as well, if they want to kind of have a certain amount of stock. And then and on top of that as well, if anyone wants to get in contact with us at Contact Parable Games and you want to stock stuff, just get in touch with us and we'll put you in touch with our distribution links in the US and get all of that set up. Because the more stores it's in, and with the more players that people can kind of see and be playing it in store and building a community, that's really what we're about.
Yeah, we'll have
Okay,
all.
so I
Go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry, Scott.
I was just going to say one more, just for those listening, go to the description. We'll have all the links in there. But Parable Games is also easily searchable. Just type in Shiver and boom, they come right up. Well, Shiver RPG, and they're the first one that pops up. So sorry, Keith, go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So to follow up on the whole retailer thing. So if I want to run this at my little friendly local game store, which is about a mile from my house that my buddy owns, what scenario do you recommend is a good demo scenario to run it at their store?
Okay, so there's two that I use at the moment, like kind of most frequently. So there is the starter adventure that's built into the back of the core rulebook, which is Corporate Rises, which is kind of a corporate dungeon crawl, level by level. You're escaping a evil mega science corporation where you're the bottom of the pile kind of workers who are underground and something's gone wrong and you've got to try and make your way out, survive, and try and save your job. The second one is in the back of the Cursed Library, and that is Mr. Husk, which is a 1970s adventure. You're stuck in a cornfield and you have to go investigate a spooky farm in order to get your crashed van back on the road before night properly rolls in. So I say that, like, for starter adventures that you can run like just in an evening and are very modular in terms of like how you can play around with those two adventures are great for running in stores.
Perfect. Because I've been telling my buddy that owns the store about Shiver right when I got it, and he wants me to come run a game demo. So on one of his weekday game nights. So obviously I'll be doing that here in the very near future. So I got some reading to do, but I appreciate the recommendation. I think that'll also help listeners too. Scott, yeah.
Just one more thing before we wrap. The one thing I want to point out, and this is coming from a guy I've said time and time again on the podcast. I'm an art guy when it comes to RPGs. It's for me and several people, it's the first thing that's going to capture the attention of most role-playing games books. And I just want to give a little shout out to Ben Alexander, whose artwork I believe is just superb. It definitely carries a bit of a Mike Mignola flair to it, and it perfectly just kind of embraces Shiver as the game itself. So just want to give a little shout out to him. Love the artwork, and for those of you who haven't picked up Shiver yet, the artwork is a fantastic compliment throughout the entire game. So yeah, just want to give a little bit of recognition, because usually it's most RPGs have like 15 or so artists, and I'm just going to go, the other looks great. I'm not going to acknowledge them all, but since there's just one name right there in big bright letters, I'm going to say, Ben, you did a fantastic job on this, and I'm looking forward to the other works you do. So, but Keith.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So on that happy note, Charlie, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your evening to come hang out with Scott and I on the episode with us on the show, and tell us about Shiver, tell listeners about Shiver. I'm super excited to have my copy and the Curse library. So I got some reading to do, and I got a demo to go run.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. Yeah, no, this has been lovely. Like, yeah, honestly, thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We'll definitely, have you back on again in regards to, if anything else that comes out through Parable Games. And also, like we have, tell anyone that's on here, if you'd like to come in and just talk about a different subject, if there's a topic that, that's eating away at you, or if we mention something that you're like, hey, I want to talk about that. Your brother, you're both welcome to come on, and, and give your opinion. So, the world can shout at you and tell you that you're wrong, like they do to us all the time.
We get it all the time. Yeah. We call it fan mail.
But yes. So should I just give you my card now, or never mind. I'll just put it in on a Game Found In. So, no. So I'm looking forward to this, because I myself also, where the local store is doing a Halloween special event. So I think I found the game that I'll be running there at the store. So I'll definitely be giving Shiver a go and see how it plays out. But I think it'll be fantastic. So you've got two converts here.
Thank you.
Yeah, go check out Shiver, everyone. It's definitely worth your time.
All right. Well, with that, we are out of here.
Well, then, that was quite a conversation that we had with Charlie. And since that happened, there looks to be some good news that has come since the double feature of their, it's not a Kickstarter, it's a Game Found. Their crowdfunding dropped. And where are they currently at?
Current tally as of this little snippet is at 16.6 thousand pounds.
Right.
So they've smashed their funding goal, which was only 10,000 pounds. So congrats, guys.
Yeah.
Charlie and Barney, congrats. And they are working through into their stretch goals.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna take care of some financial stuff that I got to take care of, and I'm going to throw some money at this because I got really excited about it.
Yeah,
talking to Charlie. So,
oh yeah, no, I hopped on day one and backed it. But the one thing I need to do is also see about getting the core rule book, which is currently on sale a couple places, and I know they provide it. So for anyone who's not familiar with Shiver, like a lot of games when they come out with supplements, is for a discount price they'll give you the core rule book and the whole 100 yards of it. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of stuff. And like Charlie had mentioned, just in case you missed that part, Game Found's a little different. It's kind of pick and choose, a la carte, so to speak. So you don't necessarily have to back a full package in order to get all of the little extra fiddly bits. You can kind of pick around, choose what you like, choose what sounded good, during the conversation. But congratulations to, all of the fine people over at Parable Games. So yeah, we're excited. And I do expect a formal thank you card in our boxes when they arrive, thanking both Steve and Kevin.
Yeah. I would like to throw a plug in for they're not a sponsor of the show, but if you'd like to pick up a copy of Shiver core, the current core rule book, or the Curse library, the scenario book that currently exists over at Indie Press Revolution, both of those books, physical with a PDF of it that accompanies it. They're currently on sale right now. I think it's through Halloween, so October 31st. Mm-hmm. Currently on sale. So hashtag sponsor us, Indie Press.
Yeah.
But you can go over there and get it. And those guys are fantastic. I buy a lot of books from them, so they're really great to buy from.
Yeah, it would be nice to have a sponsor, even if it's the little lemonade stand on the corner with the 12-year-olds called Lemon Press. They're more than welcome to sponsor us too. So any and all things to kind of help mitigate some of the costs, because guess what we found out over time is doing a podcast is not cheap.
Work?
Yeah, it's work. It's not cheap. It's time
not
consuming.
cheap.
Yeah, exactly. So I now understand why so many people have Patreon. So maybe hopefully someday soon, once things kind of the holidays get a little bit closer and we have a bit of time, maybe we should do a Titterpigs Patreon. What do you think, listeners? Would you sign up for something like that?
Especially to keep us ad free.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm about to go back through all of our episodes and start adding anchor ads. You especially, but yeah, I know, because I kind of think we might be considering moving to another host anyways, because Anchor's kind of they've got some issues. So Anchor, if you're listening, we'd love you. Don't delete our shit until we get it off your server. But anyways, before we ride off into the Halloween moonrise, we'll say we're about halfway through October, and so the witching time is almost upon us. Do you have any plans, Keith, coming up, gaming wise, Halloween wise? Anything coming up soon?
The only thing I got on my horizon right now, work is as usual crazy, but I am gonna make some time. I'm getting my local band, as it were, back together with my buddy Pat and my local friend Roz, and we're gonna do some gaming with my granddaughter. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna do a little old school essentials. We're gonna break out of our traditional 5th edition D&D stuff that I do with my granddaughter, and we're gonna do a little throwback. And do some OSE, and we're going to play Incandescent Grottos from Necrotic No.
Cool.
And we're going to see how that goes. My granddaughter's super excited to play. I'm just happy to get 2 of my oldest gaming friends back together and playing again after quite a long break, even before COVID. And then COVID obviously broke the band back, kept the band apart. So we're getting back together. We were supposed to meet this coming weekend, and life happened again. So hopefully the following weekend, in and around our Delta Green game that we are tentatively scheduled to play. So in and around that, we'll play some old school essentials. What about you? What you got on?
Well, I got a couple things. So we're taking a little break from the Masks of Nyarlathotep campaign. One of my players is getting married.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So,
no, I'm just kidding.
But I'm looking forward to picking that up again in a couple weeks, probably before Halloween, as they have finally fled China and are making their way to Egypt. And woo boy,
is right.
Have they left a scorched earth over in Shanghai? It's just one of those things where how no matter how serious you want your Call of Cthulhu to be on the straight and narrow, it just so easily just evolves into this pulp Cthulhu aesthetic. It's now these ham-fisted adventures of this an Italian mafioso and his crew.
I started running it in pulp. I just went right to pulp when I did it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in hindsight that would probably be the my recommendation for anyone. Definitely, for something that's covers the world with all the crazy nonsense going on. Make it more The Mummy as opposed to something more serious, because it works out easier. And then other than that, we've got my son and his friends have been begging me to run Cyberpunk Red for them, so that'll be coming up soon. They've made their characters. They're already bargaining with me on stuff they can have. Hey, I modified this pistol to have 2 barrels. Are you going to allow it? So I mean, it's that kind of stuff.
Are you gonna take something from Charlie's playbook and do Cyberpunk Red with Shiver?
No, because my son and his friends have spent the past couple weeks reading the Cyberpunk Red book. So I'm not going to throw them that curveball. So they know the rules inside and out, which is great. But now they've gone back to the old books. and they're going through there trying to find, ridiculous weapons and cybernetics and stuff. And so, yeah, and it seems to be always the case. It's like, will you allow this? And, it's this ridiculous sniper rifle that does, 30 D10 damage on one shot. And I'm like, no, you're out of your fucking gourd. I'm not allowing this for, what would essentially.
Oh, yes, you will, because you're a sucker.
No, I mean, yeah, Cyberpunk's different, but we'll see. But I mean, I'm not. And for those who are talking about, well, what about, he's, it's supposed to be fun, and he should have, his agency. Oh, he can have the gun. It's just that he's going to have to climb to the top of Arasaka Tower to get it and go through a bunch of trial and tribulations before he obtains it. So it's not just going to be, oh, you found it on, the curbside of old Chinatown. There you go.
Yeah, sitting on top of a trash pile.
Exactly, because that's how they
somebody else's detritus.
Yeah, because they're teenagers. That's how they run your shit. First level of Vorpal Sword, go ahead. I don't care. But
well, good luck.
Yes, and other than that, just trying to decide if I'm going to be running something for Halloween right before Halloween on the 30th at my friend's game store, or we've been invited to a Halloween party of some friends around the corner. So, I
recommend the party.
Yeah, I'm thinking kind of gearing towards that because just need a little break. And
I look forward to the Twitter posts.
Yeah. Hey, they're not too bad. No,
they've always been entertaining.
Yeah, we'll see how they go. But yeah,
I like to see what shows up in the mailbox about 5 to 7 days later. Always makes for great mailbag episodes.
Oh, absolutely. So, but that's about it for now. I'm sure things will change or be added as they occur.
Fantastic.
But that's what we got rolling. So, well, I mean, there we are. I think this is, a nice little segue to, ride this particular episode out into the sunset. Thank you all for listening. Appreciate, you following along to, as we continue with Titterpigs on episode.
This is episode 15. So I just want to throw this out before we do ride this one off into the sunset.
Yep.
We are 1 year into this endeavor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we are 1 year into this endeavor. So thank you everybody for being along for this 1 year journey. Yeah, I got a notice on Facebook that we put out our second episode a year ago. And because our first episode was more of an introduction episode, but our first real episode horror was a year ago. So we are releasing this episode at the same time, 1 year ago, or on our 1 year anniversary. So, wow, it's crazy.
Oh, wow. Geez. And we've only put out 15. Well, we might change that as we go along. But anyways, no, I mean, it's our freshman year. I think we did good. We made it over the hump. So we did. Speak. Yes, we made
now
it.
Now we're going into sophomore year. We gotta ramp it up a little bit.
Exactly. Hey, well, happy anniversary, Kevin.
And same to you, Steve.
Right. Well,
so I think that does it. We're going to wrap this one up, put a little bow on it, and we are out of here. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
I am Frau Blucher.